You're listening to a mini episode of the Practical Permaculture podcast with Joe and Elise.
Hey, fellow Permies, welcome back to the second last mini episode for season 3. Can you believe we're almost at the end of season 3? Today, we're diving into Permaculture Principle number 9, use slow and small solutions, or use, small and slow solutions, depending on which way you read it. Now, if you're like me, then you probably want everything right now. Then I've got to admit, I've always been a want it now kind of person. You know, you order something online and you expect that package to be at the door in 5 minutes, which is a terrible thing to say. But, I am a little bit impatient sometimes. And really, in today's world of instant gratification, where feedback is absolutely immediate and we're constantly in a rush, it can be really hard to slow down. It's something I've had to learn to do the hard way, and I've had to learn it a few times over in my own permaculture journey. I've gotten a lot of feedback with my actions that I do need to slow down. But, that's what it's about, right? Slowing down is exactly what permaculture teaches us to do. So these days, before I dive headfirst into a new project, I ask myself, what's the least amount of effort, input, and energy that will still give me the best results? And I ask that from a perspective of how can I make small changes? How can I do smaller things and be smarter about what I'm actually doing? Because let's be honest, we don't always need to go big or to go fast to achieve great things. On the flip side, there's the other camp, which is the paralysis by analysis crowd. So they're the ones who, might hesitate to act because they're unsure or worried about what the outcome will be, or they think that it won't be perfect. So therefore, they just won't do it. But the reality is that the sooner we learn to adapt and we make small adjustments, the easier things become. Flexibility and taking action, even if it's not perfect, and nothing is perfect. Perfect is a misnomer. It's far more effective than staying stuck on the sidelines. So, after all, done is better than perfect, but done small and done slowly with due consideration is the way to go. So, the beauty of using small and slow solutions is that it gives us the space to observe. So, I know we've spoken about observation a lot, and it has to be one of our favorite permaculture principles because observation is where the magic happens. It's where when we take that time to notice what's actually going on, and look, whether that's in our gardens, I mean, I'm putting this in a garden context, but it could be our lives, our relationships, our jobs, our anything like that. But when we take the time to observe and notice what's going on, then we can make small adjustments that really optimize either the system or the situation. It's like finding that sweet spot where everything just flows with the minimal amount of effort. And trust me, those small tweaks make a huge difference. So let's take this back into the garden. So let's say you want to plant a food forest. So instead of planting a massive food forest all at once, why not start with a really small patch? So it might be a couple of trees. So when we start small, we can then test different plant guilds, for example. We can try out various mulches. We can experiment with what's going to be the best way of adding organic matter, so composting. So you could then maybe do a bit of a test and muck around with a hugelkultur bed over here, and then maybe a lasagna garden here, and then maybe an enclosed raised bed somewhere else. And then that means that starting small lets you experiment and see what works in your specific environment and context. And then if something doesn't work out, well, no worries. You haven't invested a heap of time or a heap of money or resources or heart into it because you know that this is a bit of an experiment and a bit of a test. So I'll give you a bit of an example from my own garden. So a while back, when I first found permaculture, I got really excited about food forests. I was like, oh, man, I'm into permaculture and I need a food forest. And in true want it now style, I planted a bunch of different trees and plants all at once. So it was a really ambitious plan, but let's just say that the plants didn't get the memo on what I was trying to achieve. So look, some trees and plants thrived, others struggled, and many of them just outright rebelled and just died on me because I hadn't done my preparation. I hadn't put the time and the effort in because I was just frantically racing to get it all done. It was so chaotic. So after that, I took a step back, I regrouped, and I started small. So I tested on a few of the trees that were left. I tested a couple of companion planting ideas in a smaller area, and just really took it a lot slower and really taking my time in understanding what was actually needed by the tree and the plant. So I observed, how they interacted. I adjusted the mulches that I was using, and I trialed a few different ones on a few different trees. And I tweaked the watering system on what I'd been previously using. And once I figured out what worked, well, I'm still figuring out what works because what works for one area doesn't work so well for another area. So I'm still figuring that out. But generally speaking, when I figured out what was the general consensus of what was going to work in my particular context, then I started to expand little by little. And it just works so much better that way. It was a lot less heartache, and I could see that what actually needed adjusting, without feeling completely overwhelmed that, oh my god, I've got to do everything now. So instead of all the weeds growing in because of a particular mulch that I used that was ineffective for the purpose that I was needing it for, I could now go, okay, well, you know what, that's just one tree, and I can focus on, I just need to attend to one tree at this point in time, and it was far easier to deal with. And that's the beauty of slow and small solutions, is they give you room to adapt, and they're way more forgiving than going all in from the get-go. And this idea of experimenting on a small scale first works in all kinds of systems. So let's say, you want to try composting, but you're not sure where to start. And you think, I just need to make a heap of compost. I'm going to set up this big hot compost system. And then again, you don't have all the inputs and you get overwhelmed and it's all just too big. So instead of starting there, maybe you look at, okay, what does my garden need? What inputs do I have access to, and how much time do I have? So it might be that you then start with a worm farm instead of a compost system. I mean, it's vermicompost, so it's still a composting system, but you can start with a worm farm, or you could start with a cold composting system, or maybe you do some in situ composting where you're actually digging a trench along your garden beds and burying veggie scraps that way. There's lots of different ways that you can go about that. And this gives you time to see, how it's going to fit into your lifestyle and your routine as well. Then when you're ready, and you've figured it out and you've got your process down pat, then you can scale up and you'll know what works for you and you won't feel like you're in over your head. Look, same goes for, say, water conservation. So you don't need to invest in a massive rainwater catchment system right away. You don't have to go and dig a dam or put 30,000 litre tanks on the property somewhere. You can start small. It could be a rain barrel. I mean, we're going to upcycle some wheelie bins that we've come into that we're going to end up as landfills. So we're going to be repurposing some of those, and we're going to be using those as our water catchment on our coops and our smaller structures. This way, we can join lots of them together. They're movable, they're interchangeable, so we can then work out exactly what is needed where. And you can do the same thing as well. You can have a look at how much water you capture. You're also then giving your garden a chance to see how much water it actually needs for you to capture, to make sure that you've got enough water to see you through those dry periods, and how much you actually really need to use. As I said, you can always add more and more and more as you go, because that's making those small changes as you go along the way. So I've also learnt that using small and slow solutions means that you have a lot more time to make those all important tweaks. You're not spending these huge amounts of time trying to make massive changes. Those little tweaks can only take, maybe 5 minutes or an hour here. Like, they're far easier to be able to do and to adapt to. So, like, picture this: you've got a small garden bed, and you'd say, you try a new mulch. So maybe it's straw or wood chips or something like that. So you start with a small bed, and then that way you can easily observe how it affects, say, moisture retention, and how it affects weed suppression. Maybe one mulch more than the other harbors slugs and snails, which you don't want, especially if you're going to be growing leafy greens. And if you don't have ducks, ducks are great for that. But the idea is that instead of mulching all of your veggie gardens with the same mulch and then going, this didn't really work like I did, then you can make those, do those experiments, and then you can say, all right, well, now I only need to change out one bed for that mulch instead of all of them. So I really like slow and small solutions. I think that it's just the smart way to go. So that's why, the principle is all about small, manageable steps that really let you adjust and grow as you go. Now, if you're thinking, like I used to, look, I'm still not convinced. I just want to go big. I want to get it done. I got to get things in. Let's go. I get it. I really do. But remember that, when we rush in, we're more likely to overlook the subtle feedback that nature gives us as well. We might miss that the soil's drying out, or, the sunlight's hitting a certain area at different times in a different way. And those are the things that you can catch when you take it slow and you take your time. Sometimes those small adjustments have the biggest impact. Actually, I could say almost 90% of the time, it's the smallest adjustments that have the biggest impact. Like, why would we go and put a whole heap of effort and energy and resources into something that, is highly likely destined to fail if we haven't tested it out and made those small tweaks first? So to wrap up this particular episode, I suppose I want to share, the whole point of slow and small solutions is to build resilient, sustainable systems without getting overwhelmed. And whether that is planting a garden or building a food forest, or, starting a new habit in your daily life, starting a new project, could be starting a new job. It gives you room to observe, adapt, and improve. And as a bonus, you get to save your energy and your resources for when it really matters. So before I finish, I want to challenge you to think about one project that you've been working on, or maybe something that you've been hesitant to start, and ask yourself, what's one small step that I can take? And it might be that you wanted to start something, or it might be something that you've let go. It could be a garden bed that's gotten overrun, or maybe it's your composting habits or your recycling habits, or maybe it's something to do with the community. You want to get involved in the community more, but you think, oh my goodness, I just don't have time to get involved in the community garden and this and this and this and this. Just maybe pick one that you don't have to do a huge commitment for and get involved in that. It doesn't have to be big or dramatic. It's just something manageable that you can achieve right now. So that is it for today's episode. I'll be back next week with our very last episode for season 3. Join me then.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, then please give us a like, a review, and share with your friends. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We're sure you'll find the right podcast for you.